started with our first session. He's a resume building interview.
Thank you so much, and happy Earth Day, Ron, and to everybody. We want to make it the best Earth Day of your life here. I'm really excited, as I mentioned a few moments ago. Growing up and wanting to have a career in sports, there really weren't events like this. Certainly, if there was any kind of a conference, it would be something that maybe you'd have to fly to. The fact that our world is shrunk in that sense, and now we have the ability to connect this way and be a lot more inclusive is really exciting. So I hope one of the positives of going through what we did with COVID is we kind of learned to adapt to remote learning, and there are times when it's actually advantageous, and I think this is one of those. So again, excited. Ron, thank you so much for all that you do, and your wife Kelly, who I consider the unsung hero of our team, for your resilience, your perseverance, collaboration, and vision in putting all these pieces together with so many amazing sports industry professionals, and I'm absolutely honored to be one of those. As we discussed in our session yesterday, and as my students, and I see a number of them here, I'm really, really excited that they've taken the time to join me. They've heard me talk about this event for a few weeks now in class. But sports is not a linear path. There's not just a playbook that you follow and a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. It's so much based on networking and contacts and somebody that wants to introduce you to someone. I do that all the time with my students. I see a particular area of interest. I'm impressed with their with their work ethic and determination, and I'm happy to speak for them. It's happening all the time. I've got one of my students who's up for a job in the NBA in operations, and it's with someone who I met through a friend a couple of years ago before he got into the NBA, and was really impressed with him. He got into law school. We had coffee near where I live in Pacific Palisades, and fast forward a couple of years, and now he's in a front office position with the Brooklyn Nets. And lo and behold, one of my students is interviewing for a position with the Nets. So guess what? When I find out who he's interviewing with, this person that I know, that I've been in touch with, hadn't talked to him in a while, maybe a year or so, I reached out, said, "You're talking to a great candidate for this position of yours." And he wrote right back and said, "Thank you so much for what you said. I agree." He's made it through the first couple of rounds, and we're excited to keep pushing forward with in the interview process. Like, that's how it works. It's that kind of just pretty basic of connecting people and being impressed with something that they've done and being willing to to pass that information along. And so that's think of that at kind of a in the overall big picture thing is about just sharpening your skills to connect. And like Ron was saying, I hear this a lot. I heard this when I was in a similar stage in college. I'd meet someone, I'd get a business card, I'd follow up. And one guy told me one time, this was a local sportscaster in LA. He said, I do this. I talk to college students a lot. I give my information out, my cards out. And you're the second person there's two people that have ever followed up and called me after that. One person went on to become an anchor at CNN, and the other one was me. And I was just amazed because he was very much like, let me know if I can help. And he was a huge, huge impactful person in my life. So if people tell you to be in touch, then be in touch. And today we're going to talk about, as we go along in I think the next session in the afternoon, we'll talk a little about staying in touch. For now, one thing I wanted to add, my good friend George Raveling, my students hear me talk about him, the Hall of Fame basketball coach and person, says you have two choices when you wake up every day. You can be happy or you can be very happy. So I would just say this is one of those very happy days for me, and hopefully for you guys as well. Another thing that Coach Raveling says is surround yourself with extraordinary people as often as possible. And I promise you, you will meet extraordinary people throughout this day. I do want the session to be interactive, so feel free, and Ron will help me monitor questions. In case they come up, just use the raise hand function. And if I don't get to you right away, just hang in there and be patient, and we'll get to all the questions. But I don't want you to have a question and then have to hold on to the question for 45 minutes or something. So feel free just to ask when you have something that you want to talk about, or if you want to share an experience, feel free. Ron, do you have the my keys to success that you can put on the screen?
Jeff, sorry about that. Yes, let me get those.
No worry, no worry.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna
Sure.
stop the share and find that.
Yeah.
All right, can we see that okay?
Yeah. I'll just have you scroll down. I'll just tell you when to move down. That's fine for now. So I wanted to. These are some. Again, my students will recognize this document, but I wanted you to be thinking about some of the things just in an overall way about what we're doing today with the conference. Just some thoughts I have. I have what I call my 4 Ps. It's kind of funny because Leonard Armato, who you're going to meet later in the day, as Ron said, just a truly amazing, amazing career, and even a better person. He has his own 4 Ps as well. You're going to hear this again. Neither of us have a copy written, so we're happy to share. But the 4 Ps for me is passion. I put them in this order: passion, preparation, performance, and persistence. I think passion kind of fuels everything. You hear that a lot. Everybody that comes into my class, all of my guests, I had Scott Boris, the baseball agent, this week, and I think my students could feel the passion. He came to my sports business media class at USC. Super passionate. But that fuels the preparation. And I would say that if there was one MVP, most valuable of those 4 Ps, it would be preparation, because I think that sets the tone for everything else. Certainly sports is a performance-based business. Obviously, if the job isn't getting done on the field or on the court, in the pool, wherever, then other people will come along. I mean, whether it's the coach or players, other people will get chances. So you have to perform when you get the opportunity. And I think persistence sort of ties it all together, and that's why I put it last, because it's kind of always there. You have to continue to be persistent. And you're going to hear so many stories about overcoming obstacles when you talk to people in sports. It's their persistence that gets them through those periods when there's a little bit of self-doubt. So going on quickly, my keys to success. Number 1, and I made it number 1 a few years ago. It was hovering down there a little bit. I looked at my list one day and I said, there really isn't anything more important than making yourself invaluable. So that for me is number 1. And that just means that wherever you are, wherever you're working, internship, volunteer, community service, whatever it is, that you will find ways to make yourself essential, so that when you finish your internship, your service, even if there isn't a full-time job waiting, you've made friends and you've made contacts that will speak for you and endorse you. And really, you've left them feeling like, we want more of that person. We need to hire them. We need to bring them back. And again, even if that doesn't happen, if you do the kind of job that you put your mind to, and you really deliver, then you're going to have allies. You're going to have people that will speak on your behalf. To build real relationships with people. Again, not so much like, what can this person do for me, but what you can learn from them. And that's where I think the relationships at this stage for you guys are most valuable, is what you can learn from them. That's where they want to help. This is what helped me on my journey. Let me try to help you. So think of it in those terms, learning as much as you can, not just having an impressive collection of business cards. What can you learn from them? So that's the key. The follow-up so that you can start the process of learning from. 90% of success is just showing up. Don't misinterpret that. That doesn't mean just showing up and, you know, being a bump on a log. But it means that being there, even if you're not sure what exactly you're going to be doing in your role, you're there and you're enthusiastic about learning. You're enthusiastic and energetic about helping out. Maybe you finished your task. Is there anything else I can do? Just being there and being available, and just them knowing that we can always count on this person. They're always around. And sometimes when you're always around, you get handed jobs or asked to do things because of the fact you're there and someone else isn't. Be prepared to wear a lot of hats. You're going to hear that a lot, I think, as you talk to more people, which it just means perform multiple tasks. When I started my basketball event in the Bay Area called the Pete Newell Challenge, to honor Pete Newell, a legendary coach, coached around the same time John Wooden did, a rival of Coach Wooden's at Cal when Coach was at UCLA. I all of a sudden I was negotiating contracts with a TV network, with the arena where we played the event, the hotel where the team stayed. I had to learn a lot of things, and I didn't necessarily have the background in those areas, but I had by then enough contacts in my network to ask the questions I needed to perform those tasks. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. Like, people want to help, so don't worry about you don't have the answers. Ask questions. Be a good listener. You'll learn more and earn more that way. Ron, if you could just scroll down a little bit. Be patient. Again, you're going to have rejection. It's just part of the job seeking process. And I think especially so in sports, because so many people want to get into this space. So just give yourself time. Don't be too hard on yourself. Keep the persistence helps here, but don't get discouraged. Surround yourself. When I was building, my team with my Pete Newell event, everything else I've done where I've hired people, it's just my belief in hiring good people and letting them do their thing. Solid, capable, experienced people. That's how I'm thinking, is let people do what they do best. So that hopefully you'll get to that point someday where that will be an issue. And then just along the way, ask yourself as often as possible, am I doing as much as I can to reach my goals? It's kind of like, just your self-analysis. I think it's a good thing to do every once in a while. Again, don't be too hard on yourself. You don't have to do at this point in your life, any kind of a weekly account of things, but periodically, just think about where you are and where you want to go and what steps you can take, and keeping a journal, a notebook, things like that. Good idea. And then I think a lot of the people I talk to in sports, they say if they had one regret, it's that they didn't enjoy it more along the way. And so while you're on your way to getting where you want to go, just kind of appreciate what you have an attitude of gratitude. Grateful is a really important word in my vocabulary, and hopefully for you guys as well. And then Ron, if you could go to the networking document. So just what I would consider to be just some fundamentals about networking. I think you're going to hear this, things close to this during the course of the day. Everybody has things that were important to them. I just want to share these things with you so you can be thinking about them. You got my 4 Ps again. It's all about relationships, who you know and who knows you. So make sure as you're building your relationships that it's a real relationship. I made the mistake one time early in my career of putting somebody down as a reference, and I hadn't been in touch with that person in a couple of years. And sure enough, the job I was applying to, the person knew that person that I'd referenced on my resume, and they called them, and the person didn't recall. I had been an intern there and thought, oh, he's a well-known name. And but the mistake I made was he didn't know me as well as I assumed. So I hadn't been in touch. And I thought, boy, never make that mistake again. As it turned out, I got the job anyway. And that person who I hadn't been in touch with has since we reestablished our friendship and is a great close friend today. But that was somebody that didn't know me as well as I thought. So, be careful about that. Samples of your work, always a good thing to have close by. I suggest for resumes is to have links to your work. If you've written stories, maybe you have a blog, podcast, anything where you can link to examples of work that you've done is really good for any resume. You can also link to your profile if you're active on Instagram or Twitter. You've got YouTube videos. Maybe you've done a paper for a class that you thought was pretty insightful. Link to it. Give samples of you in action. We're going to talk about the elevator pitch. I want to get you to be thinking. We'll talk about this later in the day, but I want you to be thinking about the fundamental question I always ask students to think about is, how do you separate from the pack? What is your value add? This is going to be the foundation of my conversation with Leonard Armato, is the value add. He calls it a value proposition. You're going to hear that. What is it that you bring to the table? And as it says here, maybe it's in your life journey, your personal experiences, but everybody has something or things that you say that you think are special to you. Those are separators, maybe. So what is your value add? What if I hire you, what am I getting? And again, it has to be more than, well, I'm a hard worker and I'm really passionate. Everybody says that. So you can say it, that's fine, but just make sure it's, I am passionate. I do have a strong work ethic, and like that's not that shouldn't be sort of your sort of the foundation of it. It's the foundation of who you are, your interest in sports and working hard, but you have to build from there. So don't leave it at that. Think about what your separators are. Informational interviews are super important today. In some ways, they're easier to arrange because you have the tool of LinkedIn to connect you with people, find out about their backgrounds. Doesn't mean you're always going to hear back. Don't take that personally. If you hear back from one or two people, cast a wide net, hear back from a couple of people, great. People you might meet in your classes. By bringing guests, I think they're always very open-minded about connecting with students outside of the class. So sometimes I during when Zoom was our only way to connect with people that we'd meet, our new people, it would be a virtual cup of coffee, I would suggest. And I think that's probably still makes the most sense these days. People's schedules is to see if you can do something via Zoom if you can't meet them in person. We'll talk about later in the day about staying in touch. I'll explain that in detail in that session. Create an Excel grid as you build your roster of professional contacts. I shared that with a friend of mine who's in the sports marketing business, has a small company, and he's very much into wanting also to help students and give them some guidance along the way. And he loved this idea, and he even said, be very detailed with this grid, like when you talk to someone, like keep track of when you talked to somebody, and if you stayed in touch, he thought 4 or 5 times a year would be a good idea. So I think that's just a way that you can calculate and just it'll help you stay organized. I mentioned strategic a lot. Take a strategic approach to building your career with your resume, with networking. If you think that way about being strategic, I think it'll be really helpful and help you stay organized. I mentioned earlier about if somebody wants to help you, don't be the person that doesn't call. If they tell you, feel free to, then take them up on that. Don't underestimate the power of just being around. Goes back to saying 90% of success is just showing up. Business cards. I'm big on business cards because it's just a quick way to have, to leave your contact information with someone. I have them. I put them out on my desk to remind me about people that I've met, either to follow up with them or just to have their name and information out. It's, keeps them top of mind. So some people will say we're kind of phasing business cards out. I don't necessarily think so. Use a larger font size. I found this out a few years ago. I was emailing somebody who was a general manager of a network, sports network, radio, and I wanted to be in touch with that person. And he told me one day, your emails are kind of hard to read. And I went back and looked at them. It turns out they were just the regular, like 10-point email font size. But he's an older guy, and so for him, they were a little bit hard to read. So I thought, well, I'm going to be conscious of that, and I'll put it in 12-point font when I email some people. So something just to keep in mind, little attention to detail there. Okay, Ron, if you want to go to the resume section. Your resume is fluid and constantly evolving. What I want to help you do is to get a blueprint of what it can look like. Once you kind of start to put down the things that you feel are most important on your resume, now you've got, as you're putting it together, there may be something a week later you think of that you want to add, then you mix and match. You pull something off. The waiter job at Applebee's can go, and now you have the internship with Clippers that replaces that. And so it's going to be evolving. The important thing is you get it in a template form that you can just build from, that has some structure. I'll mention this obviously when we talk about cover letters later this afternoon, that the cover letter should be like, I say, like a snapshot, like a movie trailer, preview of coming attractions. So you want to give somebody just a bit of information about you to highlight out of the resume that gets them interested in looking at your resume. So just a highlight or so, and we'll talk about that in more detail. Most important question to answer in your resume is, how do you separate from the pack? What makes you you? So what are those things that you think showcase you best? It may be, you don't have to worry about everything being in a strict order. There might have been something that happened, say 3 years ago, or a job that you did for a few months. You might elevate that, and it would actually be ahead of something that was more recent. Again, it's being strategic. Don't worry about things like, well, gosh, there's 6 months on my resume here that aren't accounted for. No, they're not. Nobody's gonna call you out on, well, what were you doing between June and September of 2017? They're not gonna look at it that close. So don't worry about that. Again, be strategic. Sales experience. I mean, whenever I talk to industry guests of mine in my classes, Casey Wasserman was of the Wasserman Agency, was one of the first to mention this. Always kept this in mind. He talked about any kind of sales experience is really invaluable. Like, you're always selling something in sports. So if you have sales experience, and I mean sales experience like at Nordstrom, or it might have been for a startup company somewhere. You were part of a team for a business that you worked in, maybe an internship, but you guys had a very successful team in selling something for the company. Just remember that sales will resonate because everybody is selling something in sports, especially today when we're talking about the fan experience and building a fan base, all of those ways that everybody's trying to get ahead today in sports and offering a great fan experience. You're selling something. So keep that in mind. I say this in general about resumes. It should always be a good reflection of who you are as a person, not just your work history. So this is where my stuff sometimes is a little outside the box. I really put value on seeing the side of you that resumes traditionally haven't shown, which is who you are as a person. You know, what are some of the things you've done in your life that have helped shape who you are? And they're not necessarily things you've done strictly for work. We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. Yes, you should tailor or tweak your resume to the job you're seeking. I don't think it has to be overhauled, but if you want to prioritize something that they're looking for in the job, you want to move that from a little lower on your resume to a little higher, then do that. So yes, you can go back in and you can, you know, make a few fixes and corrections and tweaks depending on what the job is. I don't think it has to be completely overhauled, but it should reflect a little bit more the job that you're seeking. These are two words that I sometimes I'll write on the board when I walk into a classroom when I'm teaching a class in the communication journalism school at USC, where there's an emphasis on writing, reporting. But this should be on your mind all the time. Worship accuracy. It will help define who you are. I had a situation recently, and it was really too bad. One of my students who's really doing a good job in class reached out to one of my guests and sent him a note, and he misspelled the guest's name. And it's a tricky name, and he got it wrong. And my this person, this industry professional, wrote back, and it was kind of tough love. He said, you know, just want you to know, I noticed this, and I know you're better than that. That's what he said. Like, you know, hey, it's a mistake. I know you're better. There's got to be more attention to detail. And went back, and then the next correspondence, there was another mistake. It wasn't his name, but it was in the name of a company or a reference somewhere in there, and he called him out again. And again, he said, you know, I pointed out because I want to help. I want you to be aware of these things. So the point is, if you're someone who maybe doesn't have that, I call that inner editor, it's kind of built in, where you have the ability, you think pretty good ability to, you know, to notice detail in your writing, and you're good at being able to, you know, correct, and you have a good eye for that. Not everybody does. Then find someone that does to help you with that. So it just means you need to have more eyes looking at your work before you send it in to someone, or a note or something. Hey, could you take a quick look at this and make sure it's that I'm accurate? Because these are deal breakers. And I think in this case of this industry professional, I'm afraid, you know, my students, it's not going to be able to get that particular job or build that relationship because of those mistakes, which is too bad. You could have this, you know, all these great qualities, but one separator is your attention to detail and accuracy. And you can understand, because if you're entrusted with a task, they want to make sure they're giving it to somebody who will get it right. Make it well organized, easy to read. I think you know, the larger font size is a good idea there. I would say you should, at this point in your careers, you know, you probably can get everything you need onto one page. If you have to go to a second page, that's okay. I would say just have it on the back side. So turn it over so that you can have a one page, you know, one sheet resume on both sides if you need it. Okay, so for me, kind of separators are, you know, I like to start with education. I think that gives people a quick reference on sort of where you are. You have of course, your address and contact information at the top, and education. Even if you've been out of school for a few years, I think that's just a good marker. Like, where you went to school, where you're living now. Like, I like to get that at a glance rather than to look down and try to find that out. It's one of the first things that hits you when you see that at the top of a resume is, where someone went to school. Really helps identify. For me, it helps establish common ground. I have a lot of fun being in college myself as a professor and being in touch with people from around the country. I'm curious, and I enjoy hearing about where people went to school, where they grew up, how they got to where they went to for college. So I think it's always good to start with education, work experience, of course, but a separator for me is the third category of life experience. And when I say life experience, I mean, what are things you've done besides just go to school and work or have internship experience, that kind of thing. Like, have you traveled? Maybe you studied abroad. Maybe there's been community service. Sometimes people will put a category that'll say volunteer and community service. That's okay. Life experience just broadens it though, and gives you a chance to include more things. Maybe you were a lifeguard at some point. Maybe you saved a life. Like, that should be on a resume. Leadership, special talents, meaning do you play a musical instrument? Like, maybe you were on the debate team, you won awards. I had a student put down, remember a student when I'm part of the sports business classroom program in Las Vegas, connected with the NBA Summer League every summer for a week. And I come in and I lecture on these subjects, on resume building and networking. And we were talking about some of these life experiences, and one guy put on his resume, he received the Hustle and Toughness Award on his high school basketball team. Okay, hustle and toughness. What does that say about him? Like, hustles and grit, determination. Like, think of what that just something as simple as that, what that says about this person's work ethic. Like, okay, duly noted. He also put down, has handled his family's tax returns since his freshman year in college. He was an accounting major in college. Interesting. Okay, so that means there's a lot of responsibility to have handling your family's tax returns. Again, duly noted. Responsibility. Odd jobs. I call it cool stuff you've done. Another one of my students had him put down in his resume. He's from Chicago, and he was he didn't go to Game 7 when the Cubs played the Indians in 2016, seventh game of the World Series, but he was in Wrigleyville watching the game at one of the bars there. And so, of course, the Cubs won their first world title in 100 years, and Chicago just erupted. So he put that on there, like as one of his as a bullet point for life experience. Was at Wrigleyville during seventh game of the 2016 World Series and helped the city celebrate, something like that. And I got a big kick out of that. And sure enough, he said one of the first things he was asked in a job interview that happened like a few weeks later was, tell us about that experience. That sounds really cool. The guy was from Chicago. So there was immediate common ground, and it was just fun. Maybe you've been to, 28 of the 30, major league ballparks. Okay, that could be something you could add. It's a way to connect with people. And I don't think it's something that you're going to hear that's recommended very many places, but trust me, this has come back in a very positive way to me, how much this has paid off for students of mine when they've done this, because it gives you good talking points. So this afternoon, when we do our next session, I'm going to have examples that I'm going to share with you. I'll put on the screen. We were having a hard time getting them sent over from me to Ron, but I'll have that. We'll correct that in the afternoon. I want to share another couple of things that I'm looking at on a resume that from one of my students in the summer program in Las Vegas. Couple of things that he put under leadership and life experience. Fluent in Swedish and lived in Sweden for 3 years, attending a Swedish speaking school. Had no idea that this guy had any background in Europe of some kind. I was totally surprised when he mentioned this. Tell me more about that. How did you end up in Sweden? So he kind of, he told me the story. So it was interesting. This was the thing that really stood out on his resume under life experience. Got rejected entry twice by the University of Notre Dame, but was accepted on my third try. Now, he's a legacy kid at Notre Dame. Father went there. Grandfather was kind of a legendary figure in the athletic department. Like, you would have thought that was a slam dunk, that this guy gets accepted in Notre Dame. Got rejected twice by Notre Dame, but was accepted on my third try. So what does that tell you? What's the there's information there, but there's something beyond just that piece of information. And guess what that is? I think it's probably fairly obvious. There's tenacity there. He wasn't going to be denied. He might have gotten rejected twice, but he wasn't going to get rejected a third time. Or if he got rejected a third time, it wasn't going to be a fourth time. He was going to find his way to Notre Dame. So that was really good information because it revealed something about his character. He says, also the same resume, have traveled to Italy, Spain, England, France, Greece, Denmark. So travel, why I like that is because things happen when you travel that you can't always prepare for. It's just the way it is. You have to learn to immerse yourself in different cultures, meet different kinds of people. You're in situations. I was in Rome one summer and I hopped off a bus. I was trying to find something and I looked up and I'm like, oh, I'm here. I got to get off here. I left my shoulder bag on the seat next to me in the bus because I was in a hurry. No big deal. I lost my driver's license. I lost all my cash, my credit cards, and my passport. I got completely wiped out. I went to find the bus at the end of the route, like a few hours later, and it was gone. Funny thing was, I got some of the stuff sent to me. My address book was sent to me. I just arrived at my home a couple of months later, so somebody had found it and sent it to me. That was probably the thing that was most, that it was the hardest to replace was at that time was, pre-cell phone was an address book. But the point is that I had to just scramble and get back on my feet, go to the embassy, get another passport, call home, get money sent, all of that stuff. So when you've traveled, people just realize things are going to happen to you. So I always value when people have had those experiences. It just it broadens their world. Now, look, if you've traveled to a lot of states in this country or a lot of cities, then include that. I've traveled to, 17 states, including blah, blah, blah. Doesn't have to be for, that you were building homes for Habitat for Humanity. It can be, and it's great if it is, but it could be just travel with your family. Doesn't matter, and you don't even have to get into that much detail. Another friend of mine that looks at a lot of resumes shared this with me one time and said, I always look for teaching experience. If anybody has taught something. And I thought that makes a lot of sense. I expanded it to include coaching. If you've coached or taught, because there's leadership, there's teamwork, there's preparation, discipline, communication skills. All of those things are involved when you have some aspect of teaching or coaching. A coach is a teacher. So those are things you can include on a resume. You don't need to account for every job or period of time in your life. I mentioned that earlier. You can, certainly you can put things that are a little bit out of order, as I said, but don't worry that people are looking at it. They're not going to look at it that closely. Never make the same mistake once is saying of the late, great USC baseball coach, Rod Dato. And I love that saying. And I actually think there's really some truth to that. If you were in those of you who competed in sports, if you're in a drill and you watch someone make a mistake and get corrected, and now it's your turn to do the drill, don't make the same mistake once. Even though most people say, learn from your mistakes, why not set the bar higher? Let's not make that mistake the first time. Name misspellings, job title errors can be deal breakers. They would, I'm afraid it was a deal breaker for this student of mine that misspelled the name. You can always double check these things. You just have to be patient. You can't be too quick to want to get it sent out there. Review it, even a short note, have someone else look at it. The last thing is, people want to hire interesting people who they will enjoy working with, who are fun, who will go the extra mile to get the job done. So some of that cool stuff, the life experience stuff, that's, remember, companies are hiring people to join a team. Like whatever department you're going to be part of a team. So they're wondering how you're going to fit in. Okay. So if they just look at where you went to school and what kind of work experience you have, how are they really going to know whether or not you fit? Well, there's a better chance they're going to get to know you better when they see the personal side of you, where your personality can come out. And that's why I include life experience, because that is where I think your personality can come out. One of my students know this story, but my friend Alon Ben-Hannon from ESPN, he included on his resume when he went to interview for a job at ESPN that he had been on an ESPN game show years earlier in his life. And so, unbeknownst to him, when he went in for an interview, they pulled the tape of when he was on that game show, and they put it on the screen and showed it to him while he was there. He was, then they started to talk about his experience being on the show. I guess he finished second. He's still bitter about it. The point was, it gave them a great way to begin their conversation. And he said, I don't even know why I put it on there, but I just thought, it's ESPN, so it's an ESPN show, I'll throw it in. So that was, of course, the first thing that caught their attention. Anybody have any questions about a resume that I can answer? I'm happy to do that. This is a good point to do that before we get on to interviews. Well, I will say this, that sometimes some of the life experience stuff, someone will say to me, well, I thought I would just talk about those kind of fun things when I got to the interview. My point is, I want to get you to the interview stage. And I think having some of these things that speaks to who you are as a person will help you get to the interview stage. So that's why I suggest putting on a resume, so that it can help become a separator for you, help you stand out. Let's see. Josh, you want to just share that with everybody and just mention that? Just give me your question.
Yeah, should I put it in the chat again, or?
I just think you could just share it. We can just talk about it.
Perfect. You want me to turn my camera on, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi.
Here we go.
Nice
welcome.
to meet you.
Good to meet
Thank you
too.
so much. My question is, sometimes when making my resume, I would have too much information to fit on one page, and if I try and make the font smaller, then it could be ineligible, which, like you said, would be bad for some people reading it. But if I extend it to 2 pages, then I feel like there's too much negative space, and it might not look as good.
Yeah, so a good question. I think one thing you want to avoid doing is you don't want to cram too much on one page. What I see happening sometimes is, like, you put more information because, well, if I just squeeze it on, like as you said, Josh, I'll make it a little smaller font. I can get it all on one page. But the problem is, it's not pleasing to the eye. So I would suggest, if you really have so much good information, you can't fit it all on one page, use the backside, use the second page. you really want to have white space on a resume so that your eyes don't become, it doesn't look like, it's not too dense. And the problem is if you try to cram too much information on a page for a resume, that the really good stuff you have, there might have been a particularly important job for you that you would highlight in a cover letter. It gets buried with all the other stuff you have. So Josh, I think that's what you're talking about, right? Is like you have a lot of stuff and you've got it all on one page, but the problem is it's a little hard to read, and whatever you felt was really important looks less important because it's surrounded by too much other stuff. So I would say more white space, make it so it's easy to read, and if you need to go on to a second page, do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
For sure. Other questions? What things stand out that? Oh, okay. So, oh yeah, Isabel. Isabel,
Yeah.
you want to say hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just wondering because like from your perspective, this is like basically like as an American, like saying like they studied abroad, but I'm from Brazil and I'm studying in the US.
Yes.
So I had that in the life experience.
Well, I think probably if you include your address, whether you want to put, if you want to put your permanent address on your resume, that might show that you're from Brazil. Or if you include your, like if there were jobs, if you did internship, if you did something else in Brazil, that probably would reveal where you're from. But absolutely, I would put it in life experience. Native of Brazil, have traveled extensively, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think when you're talking about what are interesting things about you, if you have traveled and you've come here to study, or if you're from the United States and you've gone somewhere to study abroad, your career journey is a big part of who you are. So that should be really highlighted. Like it takes a lot of courage, frankly, to make a move internationally like you've done, Isabel, to come to another country, and that should be reflected. That's a big part of who you are. Your journey may not be the job internship experience you've had that helps define you, but it's where you've come from, where you are, and where you're going. So build it. You can almost build your resume about, because I think today too with sports, it's such a global industry. Everybody is looking to expand, to have greater reach in their sport. And if you have experience and you study, you can speak multiple languages, that's something you should highlight. You might find that, I mean, I know there's some interest in Brazil. I've told about the NFL coming there someday. So if you're applying for a job at the NFL, they might say, gosh, we can use this person. So make sure that they know those things about you.
All right, sweet. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Josh, you're saying, is it okay to not have every opportunity on your resume? Explain what you mean a little bit.
Yeah, sure. First off, thank you for organizing this today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So like on my resume, I have basically my education, my experience, and then skills. I really like that life experience section. So if I want to incorporate that on my resume, is it okay to take out some of the opportunities to make space for
yes,
that life experience section?
Yes, thank you for clarifying what you meant. I think you could easily take out, one or two jobs that you've had growing up, and substituting, having a life experience section that takes the space that you otherwise would have put just another job. Sometimes I think people, they'll include too many jobs, like they work for an insurance company one summer. It doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with the job they're applying, but it shows what they were doing. Like you could take out, unless there's specific skills in there that you want to highlight, you can remove a job or two that you've had. I think the more valuable stuff is the life experience stuff, because it reveals more about you, who you are. The other thing that I will add to is when you have bullet points that explain sort of what the essence of the job was, be strategic with the bullet points. Don't just put 6 or 7 and put in great detail everything that you did. When you read those kind of entries, when you have the bullet points that go on, you realize it feels like it's padding. It really feels like it's padding. You could have put in one bullet point 2 or 3 things you did. You didn't need to have 6 or 7. It just takes up space. I wouldn't have more than 3 or 4 bullet points. Give examples on those bullet points of things you've done. And also remember, don't put a period at the end of a bullet point, because it's not a complete sentence. That's the whole idea of a bullet point. But like, showcase different skills you did in a job. Was there a sales component? Was there an operations component? Did you set up for an event? Did you write press releases? Like, they want to see different. There's a real premium today paid to versatile skill sets. So the more things you can do, the better. And so highlight a few different things you've done, not just different elements of the same kind of thing that fill out, an entry with, all these bullet points. Don't do that. Different experiences you had, different skills that you learned. That's why I think it's good when you're thinking about internships. Take an internship sometime that may not be in your wheelhouse, in your comfort zone necessarily, but it pushes you. And if they believe you can do the job, you're not so sure, but they offer you the job, I would say take it and learn the skill. They obviously believe you can learn it, or they wouldn't have offered it to you. In the interest of time, I want to move on to interviews, and I hope we'll have time. I think we will at some point today. If you have more questions, bring them to the next session about that we do in the afternoon about cover letters and elevator pitch, et cetera. And we'll see if we can get to questions about resumes then, if you have more. So you get to the interview stage. I talk to a lot of students about this point in the process of like, I'm getting ready to have an interview. Can we talk a few minutes before I have this upcoming week? Absolutely. Happy to talk to you. Of course, people are nervous, and it's easy to say, don't be nervous. But I just say you wouldn't be human if you weren't a little nervous. But if you just look at it like this is the opportunity that you've waited for, like you've prepared for this. Remember that when I mentioned preparation among my 4 Ps. So this is the culmination of your preparation. By the way, the person interviewing you is going to be a little nervous for different reasons. They're going to be nervous because they want to make sure they ask you the right questions so they have a good feel for who you are. So there's a lot on their mind too. So you be the cool customer. Pete Carroll, when Pete Carroll was coaching at USC, he came to my class a number of times over the years. And he always said, you're going to probably be asked a question or two in an interview that you may not know the answer to. So here's what his suggestion was. I mentioned be assertive. Like, hey, can they'll ask you a question and right away you think, I don't think I know the answer to that. That's okay. You say, you know what? I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to your question, but I'll get it for you. I'll get you the answer. But in the meantime, I did want to mention that now you can take it back to where you want it to go. So like, don't wait until the end of an interview when they say, do you have any questions, to ask your questions? Because maybe you'll never there won't be enough time at the end of an interview to get to the questions and the comments that you wanted to make. So if there is things about your past that you really want to highlight, you got to get it in there somewhere earlier on in the interview, if possible. So, you know, that's a time that Pete Carroll was saying you could do that, where I don't have the answer to that question, but I did want to go back to one thing you said earlier. Okay, that's where you're kind of assertive. Like, you don't have to just question, answer. You can be a little bit more like, take it and, you know, have a little more interaction in the interview. Like, be proactive in the interview. Go in with that mindset. If you're doing the interview on Zoom, you can have again, be strategic. I keep going back to that. Be strategic. You could have bullet points of things you want to emphasize in the interview sitting on your lap that you can just glance at. Like, make sure that I get to this point. Absolutely make sure. Prioritize 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you want to get across during the interview, and don't get to where at the end of the interview, there's only time for, you know, one question, or, you know, it turns out, I'm sorry, we don't have any time. And then you have all these points you want to emphasize, and it's too late. Like, get to them earlier in the interview, if at all possible. So here's a really important thing that Casey Wasserman says. I always have him bring this up every time he comes to my class. He said this a few years ago. I've never forgotten. Tell them why you are a good hire for their team, not the other way around. And in other words, don't go on and on about why this is your dream job. And by the way, this shouldn't be your dream job if it's your first job out of college. So don't go on and on about why this is a great job for you. We assume it's a good job for you. You wouldn't be applying for it. Think of it as why you would be a good hire for them. So we get back to, what is your value add? How will you make their team better and more successful? How will you help them make more money? That's what they're going to want to hear. So it's a subtle difference in your approach, but it's real. Not why the job is perfect for you, but why you would be a great fit for them. So think of your value add. What are you bringing to the table? Hugely important. What matters most? The work ethic, that team first mindset, communication skills, and a willingness to always go the extra mile. I use that term a lot. Are you going to be the kind of person that will go the extra mile? You know, you're joining a team. So frame your remarks that way. Well, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to join your team, because that's what it is, especially working in sports. There's, you know, we refer to our team a lot. You're going to join their team. So think of that, talk about it like that. What matters least? Detailed sports knowledge. Now, look, if you're applying for a job as a researcher at ESPN, then sports knowledge, you're going to take a sports knowledge test. But most jobs, when I was hiring for my basketball event, didn't matter to me whether the person I was hiring had any knowledge of, you know, a zone versus a man-to-man defense in college basketball. What mattered was they were good communicators. They had expertise in the area that I was looking for. They were team-oriented. They got along well with people. They had a good work ethic. That's what mattered, not how much they knew about the sport. So I think for women, that's oftentimes something that comes up. We talk in my class. They don't know as much about sports. The detail is their, you know, dad or brother or boyfriend or whatever. It's not as important in almost every case. Don't sell yourself as a fan. No one wants to hire fans. So, you know, if you go on and gush about wanting to work for the Warriors, I know everything there is about the Warriors. I follow them. I know all the players, all the records. There's a red flag there, because what if we hire that person and we ask them to go pick Steph Curry up at the airport? Like, I would be concerned, like, too much of a fan. So think about that. Nobody wants to hire those people that they might think would be a little starstruck. Show enthusiasm. Change your inflection points, just as you would when you're talking to your friends. There are some times when you're you're a little more low key, and then you think of something and you kind of, you perk up and you emphasize it differently. That should be your approach during an interview. Put down on your little cheat sheet you're looking at, smile. If you're not somebody that sort of naturally smiles a lot, smile, or have fun. Like, you can write that down just to remind you. Be willing and able to give specific examples of your work and success you have had. This is really important, especially if you've generated revenue. Like, if you are talking about how hard you work, give examples of your hard work. Like, we worked through the night on back-to-back weekends preparing for an event that you helped run, and you helped bring to fruition. Like, don't just say that you're passionate. Give an example of that passion or the work you've done and success you've had. Because remember, when you're talking to someone in an interview, it's very likely they're going to have to sell you to their boss. And if their boss says, well, what did you like about Josh? Well, he works hard. He loves sports. Okay. What else you got? I got to have more than that. So think about, if someone is trying to sell you to someone else, you better give them something that they can work with. So specific examples of your work. Dream job, I just mentioned that. Don't throw that out. Like, I think they'll be impressed if I call it my dream job. No, actually they won't. They'll question whether this production assistant job right out of college is a dream job. Getting into the industry might be the dream, but not that actual job. Do your homework, know the company, know the industry. Believe it or not, you'd be surprised how many people don't know as much as they should about a company. A friend of mine brought somebody in for an interview a few years ago. They had just done a redesign of their website. It was a magazine transitioning to digital, and he couldn't wait to talk. Brought this person in from Ohio out to LA. Couldn't wait to talk to them, see what their opinion was about this redo and turning into more of a digital oriented site. And that was his first question in the interview. And it turned out that the guy hadn't even looked at the redo, at the new version of this site. Hadn't looked yet. And the rest, he could have been ended the interview right there. And he told the candidate at the end of the interview, I'm not going to offer you the job, but let me tell you, I was disappointed that you didn't, again, speak to what was an obvious there, which is, we're going into a new era with this company, and we wanted to get your opinion, and you weren't prepared. So really know the company, know the industry. I bring up the Sports Business Journal because we talked about it yesterday in our session. Is it indicates that you are plugged into the industry. So you could make reference to a story. I was reading in the Sports Business Journal about something you guys did in your sales department that really stuck out. And the point you're trying to make to the interviewer is, I read the Sports Business Journal. That's a good sign. So things that kind of show that you are plugged into the industry is always a good thing to do. I come back to this over and over. What makes you special? What is your value add? What have you done? What accomplishments, things that, this is on the list of those things, 1, 2, 3, 4, you want to emphasize in an interview. What are those things that are really, really important that showcase you the best? Just make sure that's always top of mind going into an interview. What makes you special? And then play to your strengths is let your personality and character shine. You're joining a team. They want to see your personality. So you don't have to be over the top. You don't have to be bubbly, but just, have energy, have positive energy. That's again, people work long hours in sports, and they want to see someone that they think, has the enthusiasm to get through all of those, those challenging times that happen just in the sports world. So I think that covers what I wanted to on the interview side. Feel free. Does anybody have any questions? Ron, do we have time for a question or two?
Yeah, Jeff, we could probably take maybe one question.
Okay, if anybody has, is there anything on there on, and again, and I think I'll tell you, if you think of things between now and the afternoon, bring the questions to the next session and we'll get to them there. Josh, did you have something on this, on the interview side?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about follow-ups after interviews. When is the appropriate time? Like, when is too soon to reach out?
I would say there's no one size fits all answer. So I just say you kind of have to have a feel for what kind of vibe did you get? I think if you sent a note immediately after to thank them for the opportunity, I'm really big on that. Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to being in touch, something like that. Not necessarily I look forward to hearing from you. That'll happen. They'll decide that. Don't take it personally if you don't hear something back. It's the way it is today. Sometimes you don't. But just, be in touch, thank them for the opportunity. And if you really felt like you got along well, like even if you don't get the job, maybe that's somebody that you can stay in touch with. So again, I would say, right away to thank them. And then I would say a couple of weeks. I wouldn't do it like another, 2 or 3 days later. I might wait, a week or so or two, just ask them if there's anything else any other information they need, and thank them again for the opportunity. And maybe even mention one thing that they said that stuck out to you. I really appreciate what you said about, working in sports, blah, blah, blah. Just like toss in a little, an item that they said that you remembered. That's always a good thing to, way to sort of thank somebody for their time.
Great, thank you.
For sure. Okay. Anybody else? Otherwise, again, I'll say, if you think of things, bring them back to our next session about cover letters and elevator pitch and staying in touch. We should have a little bit of time to talk a little bit more on questions, and I'll have those resume samples for you to look at. We'll put on the screen. We'll screen share those for you in the afternoon. But thank you guys. Thank you guys for being a great audience, and I love the interaction. So let's plan on doing more of that this afternoon.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Jeff. Definitely a wealth of information as usual, and students trusting that you processed it all, or well, as much of it as you possibly can, but certainly hope you took good notes so you can refer back to it as well. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and we actually would like you to get back here a little less than 10 minutes so you can be prepared for our panel. But I wanted to leave you some information on the screen about LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, definitely encourage you to do so. Here's a link that you can maybe screenshot. But it's LinkedIn is a professional networking platform for those of you who may not be aware. It's a great way to get connected with folks in any industry. And so you want to be able to, first of all, start off by creating your profile. It's almost like a resume online, where you go to school, classes you've taken, projects you worked on, volunteering, internships, and things of that nature. So you put that all on, and people will actually be able to see that. But also it's a way for you to be able to connect to people from a number of different industries, nationally, globally, what have you. So definitely encourage you to get into LinkedIn, and we'll reference maybe this a little bit more a little later on. All right, but let's go ahead and take a few minutes to have a break, and let's get back here. Let's say maybe just a little bit close to 9:45, and we'll be ready for our next panel.